Okay. Thanks for Andy inviting us down to talk. I don't feel cool with this thing on the way Andy did with the mic, so and it feels actually a bit. It feels like to me there's a huge echo going on with me behind me. But anyway, yeah, we have been working with Andy on the logos there for a while, and it's been good crack actually doing that. We're still in the process of doing the website, and as part of that, Andy asked us, did we want to give a talk about some of the ideas or themes that have influenced how we work. So, to be perfectly honest, this feels a bit strange. I'm used to talking about our work in a client situation, selling it to people, as opposed to talking about ideas or principles that largely remain sort of unspoken whenever we're working. So we'll get to some of those in a while. It did seem like a good idea at the time. It's not seeming like such a good idea now. It's more thought singular tonight. Most of the guys aren't here. So I kind of want to treat this sort of very informally. I can't really see you, to be honest, which is probably not a bad thing. I can see Janine in the front there. So if as I'm going through this, there's anything that strikes you, you want to ask a question, shout something out. Constructive heckling, feel free. I'm probably much more comfortable, discussing the work rather than giving some sort of a theoretical overview of it. Whenever I started doing presentations to clients, I generally wouldn't actually have talked very much through the presentations. Design is something that quite largely, or broadly speaking, should work without somebody sitting on your shoulder explaining to you what it is that you're looking at. And that goes for print design, publicity material, or websites in terms of user experience. But things aren't really quite that simple. There's obviously a lot of discussions with clients about, so with education, we don't all look at things the same way, and trying to bring clients along with you and get them to engage with the ideas that we develop for them can be quite painful at times. And so discussion about what it is we were showing clients sort of developed from there. But maybe a bit of context would help, because I've been sort of involved in the creative industry in Northern Ireland for the best part of a quarter of a decade. So, quarter of a century. Like coming on 23 years. I've worked in a couple of agencies in Belfast. I worked abroad for a year, setting up a design department for an international health NGO in Nepal. And then I started what was Fishbone about 12 years ago. The majority of the work that we did for that time was sort of branding, print literature, publicity, packaging, standard agency work. And then, as the digital side of work came on, we tried to move our clients towards the benefits of that media. But there were quite obviously very different production values and methods that were needed in order to implement that. And Ryan Mitchell, who had been running RT Networks for actually not a dissimilar length of time, about 10 years, and I came in contact through a project that we were both working on. I was designing a logo for the Church of Ireland. We were modifying a crest that they had, which is kind of bizarre, put us in contact with, believe it or not, the Heraldry Commission of which there is one in Dublin, who defend all sort of heraldry designs. They weren't impressed with what we did, but it went through. Ryan was developing the website. From then we sort of developed a relationship over about 5 years, and one of the things that we really connected with was sort of crafting our own particular specialities. So whenever we gave a piece of artwork over to Ryan for a website, it came back pretty much as we had given it to him visually. So anything that was wrong with the interface was our fault. The coding in the background was always really tight, and there was a lot of learning for us moving from, I suppose, print design to digital media over those 5 years. We made quite a lot of mistakes, but hopefully as I sort of go through some of the ideas that underpin our work, you'll see why we didn't lose too many clients along the way. Pick me up on that if I don't come back to it, actually. So we merged officially in January of this year and became Thought Collective. We do sort of quite a huge range of work. I put this one up actually because it's probably the one that some of you will have seen about. You might even have bought it. And also my two girls just think this is fantastic because everybody who has it, they have daddy's milk. And it's like they're thieves, they've stolen it. So I always think that's quite cool. I always like getting a piece of print or launching a website is always quite exciting when that happens. But actually, packaging's particularly cool because it's out there. This was a great project to work on. We do a lot of Farmview Dairy. Is actually quite a significant manufacturer in the food industry in Northern Ireland, and there's a lot of developments underway with different products that they're working on. But we also work on a very small scale with people who have just come essentially looking for a logo. But even in those small scale jobs, we would try and craft them in a way that gives great value for the client. So this is a very small butcher's based in the BP garage, I think it is, on the way to the airport up at Templepatrick. And we spent a lot of time with them trying to develop a feel for the heritage that they have as a company, as a family-owned business, but also trying to bring them up to date. And the hand-drawn type, and that was actually a real pleasure to work on. In terms of some of the digital stuff that we get to work on, S. Clark and Sons, down in Newtonards, is, I suppose, unusually in their industry, a cutting-edge organization. They have had news crews from Hong Kong, from Argentina, Canada, coming to Newtonards to interview them about the live streaming of funeral services for relatives who can't actually make it to a funeral. And this was a first in the world, and they've got a huge amount of PR from that. So the ethos of their company is one of actually trying to bring innovation to what is quite an age-old profession. So it's very interesting to meet them, and that sort of pushed us to develop a particular approach to the website for them. One of the main things that we did on this particular job was actually take the information from their previous site, which was a bit lacking in terms of direction for people who were coming to the site, and we created a hierarchy of information, which again, with working with Ryan and myself in the early days, was something that we both saw as a very important part of our jobs. You can't really design something very well until you have a very clear hierarchy. It's not just having the content that comes, but the hierarchy and putting the importance on that. In this particular case, that was something that was really important. given the people who would probably be viewing the site, we needed something that was going to be particularly easy to work through. So we created a very clear system, and then also from a sort of a marketing point of view, you had to work in some adverts to that side as well. But you can, if it's of interest, you can have a look at the site actually and see how that works. We work for Nitec Solutions and have done for pretty much as long as we've started. They were one of our first clients. We have some very established relationships. Our clients are very loyal to us, and it's been great to work with these guys. Trying to build trust with clients is very important, very hard to do, and loyalty isn't something that is commonplace in the very commercial environment that we work in. But with these guys, it was great. We developed the X equals as the solution to any problem, essentially, and that sort of has developed over the 10 or 11 years that's been in place. What's particularly relevant in terms of the context of how we work is that when we rebranded or redesigned the X equals symbol and the Nitec typography, we did a complete launch of literature and a website. The website, however, didn't quite go as we had hoped. Our ambition was very high. With Nitec, they're quite an unusual company. They've been one of the Deloitte Fast 500 grown companies in Europe consistently over the past 10 years. But for that size of an organization, they are quite a quirky, don't like to use that word, but a quirky bunch of guys. So they wanted to do something that was unusual but functional at the same time. So we went through a development with them, but by the time we came out the other end, this was I think about 5 years ago possibly, we did this. We were trying to do stuff that the coding wouldn't allow us to do in HTML, and we don't generally use Flash in the sites that we build. So we were trying to do stuff that didn't quite work. Fortunately, the client stuck with us, and we're about to start the site again for a third time. But we'll see how that one goes. I stuck this guy in towards the end. Farmview Dairies that we saw earlier, this was our first job for them. It was a really low budget job. They used to sell diluted orange in glass bottles, Milkman's Orange it was called, but they were transferring it to plastic and wanted something to launch it with. So we gave it a name. We created, illustrated the superhero character, and their sales went up 300% in the first year. Now, I put this in not because I think this is an amazing piece of design that's going to win awards, but the brief that we were given was that it was to look low budget, but it was for students and builders was their market very clearly. That's what they told us. Students and builders buy this, and seems to be true. I think at least 2 of our interns say, "Oh yeah, we buy Juso all the time." I think they pronounce Juco, they call it. I don't know where they got the pronunciation from, but at the other end of the scale from this sort of low budget work is sort of high-end products and user interface design. Sparks in London is run by a friend of mine, Gary McElwain. Some of you might know him. And Brian has been working with Gary on and off developing Pelican Exchange. The process is that very established traders will put themselves up as mentors. You you pay a fee to follow them, to watch what they do and see how they make money, and hopefully you're going to make money on the back of this as well. But no matter if we're working on a small-scale project like the Juso label, which might be 3 days' work, or the back-end development for a system like this, the principles that underpin that are pretty much the same. Okay, so some of the themes that I'm going to outline here, I think I said at the beginning, I feel slightly uncomfortable with talking about design in this way. We don't have some really it feels like Val Doonigan, if anybody knows who he is. Okay. We don't have a clearly documented process that we work through. For good or bad, that's just not the way we work. Process is very, very important, but it can be restrictive. And for myself and for Ryan, as we build our businesses, it's very much a relational process, and we haven't really spent any time pinning down the details of the process that has worked for us. I suppose conversation is probably as good an analogy as I can come up with for it. Conversation needs to be directed, but it's best when it takes on a life of its own, and that's how we work with our clients. We sit down with them, we talk about what it is that they're going to do. We don't have some sort of a grid where we fill in questions and answers. There's pros and cons to that, and we're going to change that over the next while. So, as a result of that, what I'm putting together here, or what I have put together to talk about, is really pulling some intangible principles that we've worked on. I'm not even sure that I have put the best titles on them. You can let me know. So as we go through, Andy's going to hurl out some T-shirts, because I would like some feedback. If if I say anything that you want to ask questions on, please do, and to try and motivate you to do that. Andy's got some T-shirts there to fire out. Okay, so generosity. Again, don't want to sort of keep saying how uncomfortable I feel. We genuinely don't talk about our work in this way, but what I'm trying to do is draw out some of the underlying themes about how we approach our work, and give some very tangible outcomes for these ideas. It's kind of an odd principle to even consider, but it's actually been very powerful for us in developing the business. Passion is, something that we probably hear quite a lot of designers, print or developers talking about. I'm passionate about design, and I'm not against that. Ardent feelings for design is great. That's the way it should be. But generosity is not mentioned a lot. It might sound fluffy to say that being generous with our time and our skills and ideas can be beneficial in a business setting, but we've got two examples of how being generous with our clients and people who aren't clients has been a very profitable business decision. I used to do a lot of work for a company down in Portadown, and they approached us. They're an arts organisation. They approached us for an international art exhibition that was touring America at the time. They were going to bring it over to Dublin, and they wanted a brochure, a catalogue for the event. There was very little budget for it, and we didn't really at that time want to do something that was going to be look poor. We actually were just getting started. This was one of our early projects, and we put a lot of effort into thinking, how can we help the client? to, I suppose, grow what it was they were looking for us to develop. The title of the project was Small Steps, and we had designed up some really nice ideas for how we could bring the work from 6 artists together who were all being quite difficult about what was going to go on the front cover. So there was a problem in there that they were all fighting for their own images to go on the cover. In the end, what we decided to do was to have 6 individual brochures, bind them together, and put them inside a special cover. As part of that, I put together a sort of a briefing and made a phone call to a company called Coom International, who make odor readers. And by accident, and I'm not sure that it's because I sounded too confident on the telephone when I made the call, but I was put through to the managing director of Coom International and not the marketing department, which is what I'd asked for. So I took the opportunity, outlined the art exhibition that was coming to Dublin, explained the title, and explained that we wanted to use odor readers for the cover of the catalogue. The guy at the end of the phone thought that this was a ridiculous idea, but 5 days later he had sent me 50 square meters of unscented odor reader. And this particular project has kept us in work within the cultural sector for the last 10 years. I nearly lost my wife over it because the two of us at the time spent 3 nights with Stanley knives and steel edge rulers cutting this roll as it came of odor reading material into A4 squares so we could send it off to be screen printed. So generosity doesn't come lightly and cheaply. The second project that sort of going beyond the brief idea, the idea of not just accepting what the client is bringing, but trying to find ways that you can work with the client and develop their budget on their behalf without actually being paid for it. So, sorry, jump back again. I'm not saying that this was necessarily a profitable project to do, but the long-term consequences were. This project's slightly different. We were approached through a journalist, a friend of Ryan's, to examine a brief that was given to the Zimbabwean to develop their website. All we were asked to do at the time was to assess the content of the brief and find out whether it was worth the money that was being suggested. The brief was fine. It wasn't extraordinary. The amount of money that was listed against it was pretty hefty, and there was a bit of a disparity between the two, but probably nothing out of the ordinary. However, we knew the circumstances that the paper was in. They are run from Southampton. It's printed in London. Sorry, there's a print and an online site. The editor obviously was originally from Zimbabwe. He ran a local daily newspaper in Harare and was then exiled for political reasons. The paper's printed in South Africa and London. The South African edition is shipped across the border and up to Harare whenever they can get their trucks through. Sometimes they get burnt out, in which case, for some reason, the Dutch government seemed to bail them out and buy them new trucks. We're not sure where the money comes from to do that, but I wouldn't like to be the delivery guy for the paper. But when we were assessing the quotation, we saw an opportunity for the client, not for ourselves at that stage, where they could take some of the money that we felt wasn't being used within the budget correctly, and they could develop their own content management system that would drive both the print edition and an online edition without them duplicating the input of the information, which is what they were doing to that point. We wrote this up for them, sent it off with a really detailed specification and I suppose a pitch, but a pitch for them, not for us. They came back to us a month later, I think, and said, we've got the money, we'd like you to do the job for us. Now, part of the pitch that we had given them was for the print edition, the online edition, but also we had ruled it out a bit further and said, look, if you're going to go this far, if you want to do the amalgamated content management, you could think about doing sort of SMS and iPad editions, all from the same single point of entry, essentially a multi-platform delivery system for them, in those terms. And Wilf, in the bottom corner, Wilf Mbanga, he loved the proposal so much that he left the company they'd been working with for 8 years, and somehow managed to convince their funders to give them the full funding for the whole project. And that all happened around September time last year, and from that point we were working feverishly trying to fulfill a project that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, to be honest. Wilf is a well-respected journalist. He's the Guardian's point of contact for anything to do with Southern Africa, but particularly Zimbabwe. Wilf himself is a bit of a PR marketing machine. He managed to get I think 5 yellow pencils for their $1 million campaign by TBWA in South Africa a few years ago. This year, I don't think it was quite so successful, but it was still a really good campaign. These are great clients to work with, and it's opening up export opportunities for us. The system that we built for them is based on Edit, which is another project. I'll come to that later on. There's downsides to being to this sort of involvement with clients. It can raise expectations at times because we're doing stuff that's way outside our remit, and we don't shy away from that. We actively encourage everybody in the studio to try and think of ideas to develop our clients' work. I don't know if classes should be covered with marketing. We're not a marketing company, but that's the type of approach that we do, and for these guys, it's worked very well. This is going to be an ongoing project. The iPad edition's not due until next year at some stage. Another downside to this work is the company has grown a lot over the past 2 years. There's 8 of us in the studio now. Some of the difficulties that come with that aren't just to do with clients, to do with internally. So this project comes along essentially designing a newspaper, a news platform, online and offline. That's a dream project for someone like myself who has come through doing a lot of literature. I would have given anything to have been the guy doing most of the design on this. But this ties in with another quality that I feel is really important and has been really beneficial for the studio as a whole and for the designers who've come through the studio. There's never a sense of the work that's done by an individual as being their work. The work that we do as designers is always affected by the work that the people that we work with, the environment that we have, our previous experiences, life outside of work. All of these things come together and affect what we do 9 to 5 if we manage to get away at 5 and aren't in earlier than 9. So there's an ego about design, which it's inevitable. We all like to be proud of what we do, but it's not something that we encourage. And Al McGee, who's been with me for 9 years nearly now, led the print edition of the Zimbabwean. Richard Weston, some of you might know him better as AceJet. He led the online edition. But all of the work that they put in is only as good as the context in which they're designing it. And we feel really strongly about that. We might joke that Ryan's actually the only one who does any work in the office, but that's more just to make him feel better. It is very much a team that we have developed. The name Thought Collective is much better than Fishbone, so I'm very happy about that one. So it's, but it is quite reflective of what it is that we do. Appropriate. Again, this is probably one of my most overused words. It has been since I started the company. Like generous, it's kind of, I almost want to cringe when I'm saying these things, out loud, but there can't be anything, there isn't really anything that is more fundamental in what we do, and I'm hoping I'll give you a couple of very concrete examples of how we've done that. So this might seem banal to talk about the appropriateness of design, but for us it's actually something that's been crucial. There's a, as a point of reference, something being appropriate isn't just about being suitable. It's about being opportune. And again, this ties in with the generosity and looking for ways to take what it is that we do, find new areas to apply it. And, we'll see how that works out. Our first studio was in the Midland building over on York Street. It was pretty much the set for The Shining. It was a scary place to be at 2 a.m. We had a very small room there, and furniture was going to be a real problem. The table that you see in the middle of the what's our current studio, it no longer looks like that. This was just after it was being, well, as it was being built. The table there was essentially our studio. There was the 2 channels down the middle contained a metal rolling table, and there was a lot of stuff put in that so we could move things out of the way, make a meeting room if we needed to. 2 designers working at either end. Underneath the built-in light table on the left-hand side, there was a library set underneath that with scanners and printers, everything built in. It was a tiny room. Pretty much the walls nearly came to the edge of the table. The reason why I'm showing this is that the appropriateness of building something rather than just buying a couple of tables helped us establish our brand. Fishbone never had a business card or letterhead in the 11 years of its existence, but the way we worked and the atmosphere that we created with our environment actually did all of that work for us. I don't really, again, talk about branding very much as a word. I like to talk about character. Branding, quite often, it's impossible to get away from, and it kind of sounds churlish to even say that it's something you don't like to talk about. It is what it is. But character is something that seems more substantial than branding. Branding seems something that's imposed from the outside, whereas character is something that actually you try and draw out, and that's what we do with everything that we've done. The studio itself, the colours in that particular slide are really vivid. The studio itself is a really nice place to come to. It's small. There's nothing about it that's over the top, but both the table and the studio itself were designed by a friend of mine, Alistair Hall. We worked in real close collaboration with him. We worked out what it was that we needed, what was appropriate for us as a company, and tried to find ways to, on a shoestring budget, deliver those. Alistair at the time was starting his own company, and they're now the lead architects on the MAC, which is being built just around the corner. The studio itself won architectural awards, but that's not what was important for me whenever we built it. The first client, prospective client that came through the door was the marketing director from Bernardo's in the first week that we had moved back into the studio. She didn't ask to see any of our work. She gave us a substantial job within about 15 minutes, and all we did was talk about the studio. And I couldn't have been happier after she left, because that to me showed that what we were trying to do with the studio worked really well. So architecture and furniture is one thing, but the appropriateness obviously applies to what we do day to day as in our own jobs. Chrysalis was a book that we were approached to design about organizational change, and it was about confrontation and about turning those aspects of an organization which didn't work and were destructive, and creating something very positive and healthy out of those. The title Chrysalis, we tried to get them to change because it's just such an overused analogy. It is a real cliche, the idea of transformation and the butterfly. It's awful. But that, again, opened up an opportunity. The content of the book was actually quite controversial. Some of the aspects that we had to define icons for, to draw icons for, were difficult to deal with. But what came out of the title that we didn't like was an appropriate solution to a difficult subject for organizations. So we took this idea of confrontation and tried to do something that was visually witty without changing too much in each of the illustrations. And that was great. We were able to convince the client to go with these ideas, which they found quite shocking in their particular context and didn't want to go to run with. We were able to bring them with us because the ideas were appropriate for what they needed. They didn't like the job, but they saw that the visuals were going to create an intrigue and also communicate what the book was about, and that proved to be very effective for them. This particular one was quite good. The guy used to have an armband with a swastika on it, and we were accused of being overly dramatic, and it wasn't much of a concession to actually take the swastika off because it's still okay. But Brown's Funeral Parlour's just down the street from our studio, and quite often if we're going out to get lunch, we'd have to stop because there's a huge funeral procession going past. On one particular day, not long after the book was published, there were groups of young people handing out flyers to the people who were lining the street on this particular day. And it was really sad, but the literature was white supremacist propaganda. And we actually posted it to the client just to say to them, can we reprint it and get the swastika back in again? It was they didn't go for it, but it was worth a try. I have a caveat on this one. Andy was very specific whenever he asked about the content of time. There's no commercials in this. This is going to be very difficult because anything that I say for the next 10 minutes is probably going to sound like a commercial, and it's genuinely not. So make of it what you will. The appropriateness of what we have, or what Fishbone had done in terms of print design, was also reflected in what Ryan was doing in terms of web development. There are hundreds of content management systems out there, but as Ryan was working through the jobs that he was doing with clients, there wasn't one that he felt did exactly what it was that he needed. So the logical step was to start building one that was appropriate for RT networks. There's probably been 4 to 5 years development time. in what is now called Edit. There's been a number of versions that have changed and sort of merged as needs have changed. Various aspects needed to be brought back into it, brought into it. But the last 6 to 10 months has been particularly frenetic. We redesigned the interface for something that was designed, as I say, about 4 years ago. There was a lot of things that had changed. There was a lot of functionality that people were going to expect in a browser-based content management system. That clients would expect. It would make them feel comfortable whenever they were managing their files and editing their content. So there was, whenever we came to look at the content management system as a project for ourselves, the interface started to affect the back-end programming. There was a lot of changes going on, so there's been a considerable rewrite over the past 6 months. We're pretty much ready to go with it, but for us, this is a project essentially that was driven out of appropriateness. We needed something that was going to help our workflow, to be able to switch between websites very, very quickly. We weren't jumping in and out of different programs whenever a client rang us up. There's a sort of a quick flick between whatever sites that you have built. We needed something that was going to be code independent, so it doesn't matter what program it was developing the front end or the database. By the way, I'm going to pause here. I am not a developer. I cannot program. If I'm using, and I can't actually say, usually I can tell by the words that I use. Ryan rolls his eyes and tuts, that I'm actually, using words in the wrong place. So forgive me if I get that wrong. But you'll probably get the gist of what it is that I'm saying. The code for the front end can be anything you want, as can the back end database. The content management system is pre-built. Once you know how to use it, we've built, I think there's somewhere in the region of 150 sites on Edit at the moment. It really is a matter of plugging into content management that's already there. So Dave, who joined the studio in January, programs in Ruby, and Ryan does a lot of stuff in whatever programs it is that he uses, and it doesn't really matter what's going on there. What we really love about it is that clients find it very, very easy to use. It's appropriate for them because they only actually get to see the fields that are appropriate to their website. They're not laden with a lot of stuff that's just built in there and left lying, even though they're not going to use it. So we only give them the functionality that they need. I have a sort of a list of things that I was going to read down through here, but I'm trying to make this not sound like an advert at all. As I say, this was built for us. We currently have about 5 other agencies who are using it. Sparks in London use it. So the way we've built it, in order to sort of ease that and to make it sort of better for other companies who want to use it, is that it's essentially a white label product. We have our own Thought Collective version, and you can reskin this in whatever way you want. There's a customizable, the customized section at the bottom there is actually really good, but that's more to do with some of the work that Ryan does in developing work for other design agencies. Some of them don't want to know that they are not in control of everything. So their clients think that they develop all of the sites and that everything is done by them, and that's fine. That's the way it should be with some people, as part of their brand and the presentation, how they want to present things. That's completely fine, and that's how we've built this so that they can do that. it speeds up our workflow in terms of how we are pulling things together. We can have, it's not a template-based system, so any site that we build on it is pretty much written from scratch, but there are what we call kernels that you can actually save as a template and bring in. So if you use a particular function and you need some of the code for another job, or if you work in a more template-based way, it's very easy to put those in. Yeah, I'm feeling slightly under pressure in terms of the advert side of things. So I'm just going to leave edit. This is something I've spent probably the last 6 months working on. We've just taken sort of 4 or 5 different screen grabs there, and it's very difficult for me not to get to sound like I'm trying to make you think it's the best thing on the planet, because that's kind of how we feel about it at the moment. Busy as I want to be. Ryan used to say this a lot whenever we were talking about getting the 2 companies merged. And I was always very jealous because he did always sound as if he had his workflow under control. That changed whenever we merged. This is an aim rather than anything else, and I don't have anything to say about it other than it was something that we do talk about a lot. We're not as busy as we want to be. We're too busy. We want to try and sort of get things a bit more under control, and maybe that's because we don't have a written process that we follow. Interns. This is quite a significant aspect for us. Some of what I'm saying here could prove to be controversial. I'm not sure if is Chris Murphy? Did Chris make it tonight? No. Like in terms of the university and how I was hoping Chris was going to be here. Okay. Right. So, internship's really important for me. I landed a job an internship whenever I was 16, and it was the absolutely life-changing experience working in a design agency. I absolutely loved it. So I asked them for a job at the end of my short internship, and 2 things happened in 1988. Aldus released Freehand version 1.0, and I started working in Triplicate. And unfortunately, I'm still in the design industry, but freehand no longer works. If you've got Lion, you can ditch it now. So I've had to completely make the change to Illustrator. As a student, which I wasn't, essentially as an intern, an apprentice, I suppose, in Triplicate, it profoundly affected how I think about our industry. The partners in Triplicate run a very savvy business. They continue to change. I'm here and I run my company, because of what I learned whenever I worked there, or some of the things that I learned there, and later experiences as well. But they're particularly good at changing the direction that they needed to go in order to keep ahead of what other people were doing. They've come through a couple of recessions. There was a recession in the late 80s that I remember there was a lot of frenetic activity going around them, but they did very well out of it. And at the far end of that, they were a true multidisciplinary design practice with Triplicate ISIS and the products that they'd done. And I think that type of environment for a student to actually get glimpses behind the scenes of how businesses developed in those ways was particularly good. So internships for me is particularly important. I wasn't sure how many students were going to be here tonight. There's 2 at a table right there, both well known to us. So I'm not sure if there are any other ones. So I'm kind of going to skip down through some of this because they're not, because some of this stuff just isn't relevant. Although I will. Actually, sorry, 2 seconds. Sorry, I actually brought some samples of some of the stuff that we have been talking about. Just looking at print on a screen doesn't really work, so I brought some of the things. There's a current edition of the Zimbabwean. There's a visual of what will be the print edition and some of the printed books that we've worked on. But what I've also brought is I have a file in the office that I've kept from interns over the years for people who are trying to get jobs. This was one of my favorites. When this landed on my desk, I genuinely opened it hoping that I was going to find a genius CV inside with some sort of ironic typographic approach, and it was very disappointing. This was a genuine attempt at impressing a local company to get a job. This isn't what they do. Worse than that, however, is this. I did put it up on the slide, but I took it down because actually you could see the name on it, and I've masked it out here just in case. I still can't quite believe that this came through at one stage. It sat on my desk for about 2 weeks. I kept looking at it thinking, there's something really interesting about this, but it looks very familiar. And it didn't take me long to remember that there was something like it, as I thought at the time, produced by Why Not Associates. It wasn't like it. This is a scan from Why Not Associates with someone's details put on. So it was just to try and encourage students to do their own work. It's much better than taking other people's. But one of the things that I wanted to say was about how students essentially should approach internships, because I've had some discussions with other business owners about this, and it's a difficult issue. Quite a lot of people aren't that keen to take people on. Sometimes there are difficulties whenever they do take them on. Students need to learn to make themselves invaluable in a working environment. They need to learn to take initiative, but those things are stuff that we can encourage as business owners. Year-out students from the art college are in second year. We shouldn't be expecting too much from them whenever they come into the studio, and that leads on to one of the big issues that I think causes some real problems here, and that's to do with paid internships. In my experience, salaries for students are detrimental to both the company and the student. That sounds mean. It's not in any way. In our experience, it's not. There's a huge amount of effort and time involved in mentoring students whenever they come in order to make them useful within a studio environment. We don't begrudge that in any way, and we try as much as possible to ease students in, give them projects that they can work on, projects that are going to be exciting for them to work on, not always just run-of-the-mill artwork. That's to be expected. That's what we all have to do. We all have to do run-of-the-mill stuff, but we genuinely try to sort of weave in amongst that very exciting jobs. But a job that you're maybe charging, if it's a live job that we're charging 10 hours to a client, might take 10 days to do, and that's just not a sustainable situation for that relationship to be in. The student's going to be under immense pressure. They're going to feel demoralized at the end of it, and it shouldn't be that way. The environment that we have, we hope is really good for students, and it definitely brings something to the studio. It keeps our studio fresh whenever we have students coming in. And I think it's something to be encouraged, but maybe there's better ways that we can, as an industry, that we can try and find to fit students into a working environment which is going to be successful. I'll flick past this quite quickly, actually. These belong to Janine. These were part of Janine's leaving present. She was one of our students this year. The long haul, again, I covered some of this whenever I talked earlier about working for a long time with some of our clients, and we try to develop that by establishing trust. with the clients. That's a very difficult thing to do. In any business relationship, a lot of things come down to deadlines and money. And whenever we talk about craft and beauty to our clients, sometimes they roll their eyes and go, how much is it going to cost and when's it going to be ready? And that's grand. We understand that that's the environment that we work in. We're very open with our clients about money, and we try to put as much of the budgets that we have into something tangible for them. And that's one of the ways that we develop trust with our clients. We make sure they know exactly what's happening. One of those clients is Groundwork, and we've been doing a lot of work for Groundwork for the last 12 years. We're currently finishing a small book with them that we hope is going to be really beautiful. This was a poster that we did for Skills Exhibition, and this was great. You can't tell from the poster itself, but this was spray can onto bottles and then photographed and manipulated. But the relationship that we have with clients like Groundwork, Nitec, Wheelworks are ongoing. With Groundwork, things have changed slightly recently. A lot of clients that we've discovered, small clients as well as big clients, are putting out formal tenders for a lot of their work, and it's not something that we're brilliant at. And unfortunately, we didn't get the main body of Groundwork's design requirements for the next few years. But again, as a studio, trying to sort of work through the long haul, we've put a lot of effort in recently to improving that tendering process and how we get that. We've had some really good successes. So it was like a learning experience. We weren't taking it for granted. We approached it in the slightly relaxed manner that we do, but we've discovered that tenders don't work in that way. Naming. The title for this particular bit really should be Fatalism, but I saw this sitting outside Burger Bank last summer, and it kind of sums up for me an attitude to certain aspects of design. And you can just see the company going, mesh.co.uk is taken, let's put IT services at the end of this, without considering what they're actually going to put on their vans and drive around. But that type of sort of not exercising influence or control over what we're given it happens a lot, and it's something that we try to avoid. We're not always successful about it, but that taking control over the ideas, clients, the user interfaces that we design, naming of companies or products, and typography. And a really simple example of that is paragraph breaks. This sounds actually saying this to a group of designers sounds a bit bizarre, but we're from a typographic point of view, we're very we make sure that we are in control of the type. We make sure that we know exactly what's happening. We don't just let it land on the page. And in a 200-page book, of which we've done quite a few over the years, I'd get the guys to go through and make sure that every paragraph, every line break is working the way we want it to, and not just the way it lands on the page. Control freakish, yes, it is. But it also is a good example of how we approach most of our work. We try to be really methodical and make sure that everything that we can influence in a good way is influenced. That follows over into the coding side of things as well, in terms of how we annotate code and allow other people to dip in and out. of projects without having to constantly look over someone's shoulder and say, you know, what were you thinking when you wrote that? You know, it's sort of a way of approaching the work that sort of crosses over into most of what we do. We're nearly finished. Influence wasn't something that I really mentioned. I didn't talk about any designers that have influenced us. There are many, but there's one quote that I'm going to finish with that probably sums up how we feel about work generally in everything that we do. And it was by a guy called Marcello Manali, who started Manali Tattersfield. And he said that there's nothing worse than a bad idea well executed. I haven't talked about ideas and how we develop those because the talk tonight was about sort of general themes and principles and how they impact specific aspects of our work. But that's a phrase that we come back to quite a lot, and we try not to have bad ideas to begin with. But clothing them in style isn't something that is going to make it any better. Okay, that's me. Thanks very much for listening.